My name is Kizzy Hammonds, and I am the program assistant of Illume, the Behavioral Health Center of Excellence. Thank you all for joining today. We will start in a few minutes as people settle in and more individuals arrive. For those of you who are in need of CEUs or a certificate of attendance, please make sure you stay with us the entirety of the presentation to receive full CEUs. Today's presentation is all over Zoom. We have been offering hybrid setups, but today is all Zoom. We hope you all are able to join us in person sometime in the near future. Your video and audio are muted during the presentation. You will notice there is a chat and a Q&A on the screen. This can be anonymous. Feel free to enter comments into the chat session. If you have any questions for the presenter, please enter them in the Q&A for us to ask throughout the event and at the end as well. We are also recording this event. The recording will be emailed to you later and be posted on our social media accounts. Now I would like to present Places for People Program Manager for the ACT teams, Don Ship.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Got a great pleasure to introduce our two presenters today. They've been working in the ACT program for a number of years. I'd like to say as an old dog social worker in community mental health, we come out of school, we're not necessarily trained, we're trained in how to apply for benefits and where to get a food pantry and those kinds of things. But the people that we serve are at very different levels of their independent living skills and how they can manage, from getting out of the bed to doing their budgets and their laundry. And so OT is, just really enriched the lives of the people that we serve. And both Tim and Samantha are just at the forerunner in our community. So without further ado, Tim McKay is a licensed occupational therapist. He's been working in the mental health community practice field for 13 years. He's a graduate in the master's degree program from Maryville University. And he's also served as an adjunct professor at that university. And during his time there, he's mentored multiple research groups whose projects were accepted for presentation at both the national and regional occupational therapy conferences. He is currently our team leader for one of our ACT teams and continues to focus his work on broadening the scope of the occupational therapy in the mental health field. And the co-presenter, Sam, is a licensed occupational therapist, also working in mental health-based setting. She graduated from Maryville and worked on one of the projects with her co-presenter. And she's focused on her research on mental health and homeless populations. She has been a part of creating multiple continuing educational courses, trainings, and presentations during her professional career, all with the idea of building occupational therapy in the mental health field. Currently, Sam serves as an occupational therapist and assistant team leader for the AC team at Places for People. Her work here centers around integrating clients into their communities with a focus on building client-centered skills required for independent living. Last thing I like to say is that, like many organizations, our organizations, when we have people that really do good work and strong, vision, we promote them and we take them out of the field. But both these presenters are actually doing direct service, and they're teaching their compadres on the best practices and developing practices. So we're really grateful to them, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Let's see. Okay, I hope it's all working. I've had some like technical difficulties this morning, so I hope we're all good. So we'll go ahead and get started. So like Don in our awesome introduction, my name is Sam. You'll see Tim in just a second. I think you can see him now, I guess. You'll hear from him in a second. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. So we're gonna talk about today the introduction of skill building interventions in those community-based settings. So like Don said, oh, I don't have the thing, sorry. Like Don said, I am an occupational therapist at Places for People. It's a mental health agency in St. Louis. I know we have a couple, quite a few people that maybe aren't St. Louis based, but I do a lot of work here on building independent living skills with the clients that we serve. Tim and I do the same thing. We both are supervisors on a team here that focuses on that highest level of need for individuals. So we'll go ahead and I'll let Tim kind of introduce himself and a little bit more.
Thank you. So like Don had mentioned, I've been doing this work for about 13 and a half years. I had a real passion for wanting to do community-based work. There's a lot of practicality in this setting, and it's very unique for OT to be working with this population, with this setting, or in this setting. And so I enjoy the uniqueness of it. It's very worthwhile to see the clients that we work with out in the community in that real world setting. So I just appreciate working with this population and seeing them grow and to continue focusing my work here at Places for People.
Okay, so kind of for objectives or things we kind of want you guys to really get out of this training, what's the purpose of it? So the first thing is really just to be able to highlight the importance of skill building interventions in that community-based setting. So knowing why am I doing a skill building based intervention, and then why is that important and how is that helpful to the people that we serve and different clients. We also want you guys to be able to define what an ADL and IADL is, and be able to really feel educated and be able to even provide education on what makes up those two categories, what kind of activities make up those categories, and then what interventions could make up those two categories as well. So finally, we also want you guys to learn how to implement and create your own interventions that are kind of those skill building interventions that focus on an IADL or an ADL, and we'll obviously get into what all of that means later. But being able to build your own interventions and create creative things that can really help your client to really, increase their independence and overall function. So we're going to start with why is skill building important? What is the purpose of skill building? So there's that saying that if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but if you teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And that in of an is the essence of skill building. That's why it's important. So you are really teaching a person to need less independence later in life. So skill building breeds independence in that community-based setting. So somebody that's living out in the community, specifically someone with mental health diagnoses. So you're teaching a person the skills that are required for independent living, and you're doing more skill building and teaching. So in the end, they don't need you. They need less assistance. They need less and less along, so they become more independent on their own. Looking at that level of function and then you're enhancing areas that aren't optimal is kind of that big purpose behind it. So you're looking at what skills they do have and you're just building from there. So the big thing here is, you don't want to fix it for them or do it for them every time. They need to be able to build the skills themselves so they become independent within their own lives and community. So, examples kind of this is, we're teaching somebody to ride the bus instead of kind of relying on us to drive them to appointments. We're teaching them how to look up bus routes so they can be independent within their community and not rely on others or need that less assistance. Or, when somebody gets their bills mailed to them each month, teaching them to go into the store, pay those on their own, as opposed to giving them a bill to us and to take to the store to get paid. Really making sure that people are able to independently do things on their own is overall the purpose of skill building. It makes them more successful and more effective within their communities. So The biggest thing, another kind of principle I want to touch on in this side is the writing reflex. So this is a principle. It's a motivational interviewing term. And if you're super interested in motivational interviewing, me and Tim did a presentation, I think a CEU on this for MOTA, the Missouri Occupational Therapy Association. But motivational interviewing is just really simply, it's a collaborative communication style, conversation style, counseling style for strengthening a person's own motivation and their commitment to change. So it's basically a counseling style that's very person-centered. And it addresses common problems of ambivalence and change. So if a person's not sure they want to change or not sure they want to address this specific, we'll say deficit or concern, that's a way to do that. So the writing reflex is a principle that motivational interviewing talks about, and it fits into this a little bit. So writing reflex is basically within an intervention, it's defined as a natural and instinctual response for healthcare providers or a trained care provider in general to fix the problem, to go in and just like make things right, use all that knowledge you learned from school and all of your experiences to help that individual that's seeking care just overcome their problem. It's doing it for them. And you're looking at someone and you just want to shake them because if they just did this, it would be fixed and it would be done and they wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. And you're going into that problem solving too quickly. And so that's kind of the opposite of what skill building is. It's kind of the opposite of the purpose of it. So the idea here is you really want to resist that problem solving. You want to resist moving into problem solving really, really quickly. You want to reflect and emphasize that change talk that you've heard from them. And that's kind of that motivational interviewing, strategy there. But if you're arguing for change or a certain skill that, that you think they should have, or you think they should focus on, but your client is arguing against it, or they're still kind of ambivalent about it, you've got literally the whole idea completely backwards. So you want to really promote the success that they want. You want to promote the skills that they want and that they need to be really successful in the community.
Before I get into talking about this slide, I want to make sure to mention, I forgot to do this during the introduction. So we structured the PowerPoint and our presentation in, I guess you could call it little blocks. And we have specific, slides or breaks within our presentation for questions. We felt that it would be easier to answer some questions more on the topics, on the things that we talk about more recently. So we have on your PowerPoint, you can kind of see these, that we will have 3 or 4 slides, have a question break, and then pick back up. So I just wanted to make sure that we're aware of that structure. And then Sam and I are both occupational therapists, but again, this training is for all clinicians. And so there may be times we're using more OT terminology. If we bring up something that does not fall under, your scope of practice, please feel free to include that in a question or just ask for us to explain it a little bit better. So just wanted to bring that up to people. So I'm going to be talking about some research, so hopefully everyone can stay awake for this part. We wanted to make sure that what we're talking about has some clinical research behind it. So it's important within our field to be utilizing those evidence-based practices. That's something that's really important here at Places for People, and something that we really are striving to be at the forefront of evidence-based practices. So in looking at this topic, we found a few articles that we wanted to highlight and touch on. At the end of the PowerPoint slides, you'll see the titles and the references and citations. So if you did want to look further into what we're talking about, the references are back there. The first study that we looked at kind of focused on a psychosocial rehabilitation program in a community health setting for patients with chronic mental disorders. And I'd first like to define psychosocial rehabilitation. So psychosocial rehabilitation helps people develop the social, emotional, and intellectual skills they need in order to live happily with the smallest amount of professional assistance they can manage. So psychosocial rehabilitation utilizes two strategies for intervention. The first is that you're learning coping skills so that our clients are more successful handling a stressful environment. The second is that it develops resources that can reduce future stressors. So it is important when thinking about the services that we provide, if you work in a mental health setting or working with someone with living with a mental illness, that we as clinicians and administrators want to really develop an environment that promotes recovery. So here at Places for People, we moved into a new building a year ago. And I know that in designing it in the way that it was set up, they really wanted to focus on open communication. There's a lot of group rooms, a lot of areas where people can really collaborate, and areas that we could try to work with people on doing interventions in a more collaborative environment. So if you work at an agency and recovery is really a focus, make sure to try to highlight that where you're in that setting. We also want to try to be able to develop procedures of psychosocial rehabilitation that really put an emphasis on improving client functioning in all areas of life. So we're learning more and more that we want to really look at the whole picture, that people living with mental illness also have physical health related issues, difficulties functioning in the community. So we really want to be able to touch on all those areas when we're really working with our clients. It's also important that our interventions should promote taking an active position towards people's recovery and really encourage self-determination and empowerment. I think it's really important that people's voices are heard and they're very active in their treatment and the interventions that we are designing and planning out with them. This particular study, they had 22 participants ages 18 to 43. And the participants took part in activities either in a group or in an individual meeting for a total of 6 months. Within that, there was training for daily life routines and training for interpersonal skills and problem solving. There were 4 questionnaires that were used to collect data, and some of the findings from the study is that showed that participation in the program affected generalized optimism, and that correlates positively with higher self-efficacy, higher self-esteem, and higher self-worth. They found that participants were able to care or to cope better with difficult situations and obstacles in a more positive, healthy manner. The participants also demonstrated greater faith in their abilities by the end of that program, and social skills also improved as a result of those programs and those interventions. The next research study I want to talk about focused on changes in community ability and recovery after psychiatric rehabilitation interventions. So this particular study took place in an OT department at a psychiatric institute, and they created a program called OCTAVE, which stands for Occupational Therapy, Activities, Vocation, and Empowerment. And within that larger program, there were 3 separate programs that included clinical rehabilitation interventions, which involve IMR, which stands for Illness Management and Recovery. Later on in the presentation, Sam is going to be talking a little bit more about that and can give a better description of it if you're unaware of it, as well as some health management interventions. The second program was focused on vocational training, and the third and final program was around creative therapies or one-on-one individual OT sessions. So these services that they provided really put a focus on integrating clients back into the community through promoting ability. So community integration was the main goal of that program. And within this study, there are 223 users or participants, 55 that were assigned to that clinical rehabilitation intervention, 62 in that creative therapies and one-on-one individual therapy, OT sessions, and 106 in the vocational training. There were two scales that were used to measure performance and measure how successful the groups were pre and post. The first one focused on community ability, and the second one was around recovery. And there was one predominant intervention during the enrollment in the program, and it lasted around 6 months. So as a result of the program, they showed the participants showed improvement in both community ability and in their recovery based on the scores from the scales that were used. The type of intervention that were used also had an effect on their recovery. So the clinical rehabilitation interventions equipped clients with more focused life skills. There's also a greater hope for recovery through engagement in valued occupations. And so as occupational therapists, we really, that's really important to us, that we look at the daily occupations that our clients are using and participating in, and really making sure that there's value and worth in what they're doing, and that they feel valued after completing those interventions or those daily occupations. And finally, we found an article that wasn't necessarily a research study, but it did touch on the topic that we're covering today, and really kind of honed in on sort of future research, some things that we can kind of look at moving forward. So they talked again about psychiatric rehabilitation and how it really influences both the individual's strengths and challenges related to these goals. And you really want to try to influence the community context in which the persons will live them out. The premise of psychosocial rehabilitation is that each client has strengths and resources on which rehabilitation can be addressed. There's a great section in this article that I really want to highlight, in that it mentions that in the past, there was talk that psychosocial rehabilitation interventions could be considered common sense by any professional, and more of a way to spend and fill the day rather than specialized treatment with a specific aim. And that's something that in the years that I've been working here, and with many colleagues that I've crossed paths with, that we feel, or there comes a time where we feel like, oh, we're like a limo service, or we see our schedule and we're taking people to the grocery store, or taking someone to a doctor's appointment, taking someone to do laundry. And we get there and they ask us, oh, I don't want you to come in. I want to just shop by myself, or I can talk to the doctor by myself. And it gets us feeling like, why am I even doing this? I have my own errands that I can run by myself. Why do I have to run an errand for someone else? And so psychosocial rehabilitation tries to go further than that we really want to look at skill building and doing things where people can be as independent and as function as well as they can, based around their abilities. So if someone can shop by themselves at a grocery store, and all they need is a ride, hey, let's work on skill building around finding independent transportation, since you're able to complete the task on your own. You like talking to the doctor by yourself. Okay, let's work on, maybe we can think about coming up with different questions. You don't feel comfortable with me going in. Let's work on, what can we talk about at a doctor? What can we let them know? What are some things we want to ask? So you are skill building, that you are providing value to that task, so it doesn't feel like, hey, at the end of the day, all I did was just drive someone somewhere. And I think that can lead to burnout, feeling like, hey, what I'm doing doesn't matter. And that's something we never want to feel when we're working out as a clinician. Recent years has also shown an increase in evidence-based practice interventions. Don, in his introduction, mentioned that both Sam and I work on an assertive community treatment team. And that's an evidence-based practice model that really, and one of the components of what we do is around that psychosocial rehabilitation, And it's a multidisciplinary team where we're really trying to highlight that skill building and making sure that we're working with people that can, they can function as well as as possible. There's also supported employment, some CBT work that is done in these community settings that kind of fall under that, those evidence-based practice interventions. And finally, thinking about some further direction with this, there does need to be more training of skill-based psychosocial interventions. Hence, that's why we're here, and hopefully that's why you are that's why you came this training, to learn more about these skill-based community interventions. We really want to find commonalities among the interventions that can lead to more systematic implementation of interventions. So trying to find things that work with the people that we're working with, and create studies, come up with research so that you can look that up and say, hey, if I want to do this with this client, there is research that shows that it works with this population. So it's important to kind of go further on this topic. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the how-to of skill building. And we want to really make sure that the interventions that we're providing are really as client-centered as possible. I've mentioned it, just making sure that we're looking at their abilities and utilizing assessments, utilizing communication with them, observation, to really design interventions that we feel they can complete, that they feel good about, that we're hearing their voice. So Sam mentioned that resisting the writing reflex, not jumping in too quickly with what we're doing with people. So it's really important that we create interventions that are really stage appropriate. So thinking about stages of change and not putting the cart before the horse. So if someone is wanting to learn, kind of brings up, hey, I want to open a bank account, let's not jump right into, hey, let's go to the bank right this minute. Let's kind of talk a little bit about it. They're kind of in that sort of pre-contemplation stage of change, that we're kind of talking a little bit more rather than utilizing some more of those action-based interventions. And we really want to focus on that just right challenge of making sure that they are at that stage to perform the correct intervention that really benefits them. It's also important to think about, as we're planning these interventions, what is the best way that our clients learn? That if it's someone that may have difficulty reading and we want to teach them a cooking task, it doesn't help to just say, oh, read the box, or here's a box, just follow those instructions. They won't be able to, they'll get frustrated. They won't feel like you trust them, feel like you know them. And so that's happened with me, where I've had someone who struggles with reading. And so I've had to create kind of the step-by-step breaking down a cooking task and using a visual chart and visual steps to help with that for that person. Looking at possibly skill building interventions that focus a little bit more on doing some role playing or modeling behaviors. We do some vocational interventions. So if someone is looking for a job, hey, that's a great way to kind of role play being an interviewer, the other person being the interviewee, modeling professional behavior with them. So you can utilize those skills while talking about kind of skill building. Another component that we like to use is homework assignments, and it demonstrates some buy-in for people, some accountability. So if we're working on like household management, and someone wants to work on cleaning their apartment, and we see them on a Monday and then see them again on Thursday. Maybe on that Monday before we leave, hey, can you work on, let's pick out one room that when I come back on Thursday, I'll want to make sure that I'm going to check to see if it's clean. So if you want to check on their bedroom, let's see if it's clean by when I come back on Thursday. So they're able to have something to kind of work on, and you're able to kind of measure performance and look at outcomes and see, hey, maybe that was too much, or hey, you did a great job. Let's add another room for when I come back on Monday, and provide that homework for them that way. So here's our question break. So if there are questions, feel free to let us know.
So a few slides back, someone asked if that you could share the statistics that you were mentioning. I asked what the particular statistics were, and we haven't gotten a response, but hopefully we do get a response soon. But I know that you were naming off quite a few statistics at one point, and don't know if you're able to share those or if you know exactly which ones I'm referring to.
If the person can, like you mentioned, reach back out, I can pull, look at the I have the studies.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, there's like that like citations and stuff. So all of the research articles and the things that he was getting from are listed. So if you can always review them that way too.
Sounds good.
That's easy.
And we had another similar question. So what was the name of the questionnaire that measured community ability?
Sure. It was so the initials are MCAS. So it's multi-NOMA community ability scale.
You mind saying that again?
No. So it was the NOMA community ability scale. MULTNOMAH community ability scale.
They said, or do you have recommendations of assessments, screenings that can be somewhat quickly administered for community ability, participation, and mobility? Unless you would just recommend that one.
For community mobility. We're going to talk about some assessments in just a little bit that are more like IADL based as opposed to kind of community mobility. There's like community ability, kind of more that like socialization or community integration. There are a couple of scales for that. Normally, I'm trying to think of the biggest one we use here is probably like for community integration and stuff like that is probably either like the COPM is a big one for that measures. And I think like if as an OTs, then you probably know this one already. So it's, but it kind of, and I think there's a lot of like ADL based in that one too. For like, I'm trying to think of like, I mean, they could use the one that we made, they could use our like social integration scale. But we can probably come up with like a list and stuff and send that out.
Okay. Yeah, they said as an OT in an acute psychiatric setting, we often have difficulty finding good screening tools.
Yeah,
So
like
thank
quick
you.
ones. That's kind of the issue with the big assessments is they're usually IADL based and they're usually long. So finding one that's more for like measuring community integration or socialization, that's probably going to be the best bet to find some like those.
Nice. And then someone asks, sometimes we have clients who are already used to being driven everywhere. Any suggestions to decrease this?
A pandemic is a good way to do that. So it's a challenge. The pandemic did force a lot of people into figuring out other modes of transportation. because we couldn't provide that for them. And so we utilized a lot of medical transport. There was some, I would just recommend that if there are community resources around transportation, I know we have, in looking at the participants, there are people from out of state. So I don't know if wherever they are, if they have those kind of services available, trying to test that out. I have done transportation training with people where they were reluctant to ride the bus, and I've ridden the bus with people that with kind of tested out routes with them, and have had someone drive behind the bus in case someone got very anxious and needed to hop off the bus real quickly. So we had transportation for ourselves after that. And so I think it's just looking at their comfort level, their ability, and seeing what they can do and what they're able to do, so that they can be more independent. I would look at whatever, a lot of, in St. Louis at least, the Metro Transit does provide travel training through them as well. And they used to provide a free bus pass if you complete the travel training, so.
And so much, that's all we had for questions right now. I don't know if anybody had any other ones for this section.
No.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll keep going. So to kind of start into what our next, like, a section of the training. So the profession of occupational therapy is obviously the lens that me and Tim are using when we do this training. So I'm going to kind of break that down very quickly of what an occupation is, what an ADL is, things like that. So OT utilizes the occupational therapy practice framework. So it basically just details all of the principles and constructs and everything that goes into OT practice. So the framework identifies certain occupations that are very central to a person's identity and sense of competence, and have that meaning that kind of Tim talked about earlier that really has a lot of value to that person. So occupations here are simply just daily life activities in which people engage, something that they have value in, something that they enjoy doing, but also that they kind of either want or have to do them. So to live in that social world. So occupations within the OT framework, within the OT world, are activities of daily living, instrumental activities of daily living, rest and sleep, education, work, play, leisure, and then social participation. So obviously the two occupations then that this training is really going to focus on are those activities of daily living, or ADLs, or instrumental instrumental activities of daily living. They're the IADLs. So I'm going to start with activities of daily living, so ADLs. So these are your, like it says, basic skills of everyday life. A lot of people view these as the self-care skills. They're activities that are oriented to taking care of your body. They're viewed as more as fundamental to living in, like I said, that social world. They enable your basic survival and well-being. So that framework identifies 7 basic ADLs that we may notice a concern in within that mental health setting or the community-based setting. So they're obviously listed there. Sexual activity, we're going to focus that on for this training as purposes on, in the mental health world for this. So this is going to be more of the contraceptive devices, resources, obtaining those things. Dressing, selecting clothing and accessories that are appropriate for the weather, the day, the occasion. Personal hygiene and grooming, same thing, obtaining and using those supplies. Bathing, showering, same thing, obtaining and using bathing and showering supplies. Toilet hygiene is, toileting and toilet hygiene are not ones that we do a lot within the mental health world, and I'll talk about a second between kind of the difference between those motor deficits and kind of mental, and so how we go into those. But personal care device is using and obtaining those personal care devices. So things like hearing aids, contact lenses, orthotics, if they have any adaptive equipment, stuff like that. And making sure those are well kept. And then functional mobility, and that for the mental health world and just in general, it's really just how are you able to move around or able to get up out of bed, move around your apartment, your house, things like that. So we'll kind of go into ADLs and mental health. So going along with that, an ADL concern within that mental health population is usually related to a cognitive or psychological process instead of that motor component. So when you think about OT, and I know we have a lot of OTs on here, I'm not talking about, their hand dexterity is really poor, or they, have problems with transferring and bed mobility. That's kind of more of that motor side. And that's why we see deficits in, functional mobility or dressing, is because they can't actually like close the shirt buttons. Here, and in the mental health world, that community-based side of things, we're much more likely to see the ADL concern related to that cognitive or even sensory impairment, as opposed to a motor one. So it's not because of hand dexterity, it's because of sequencing, or it's because of lack of problem solving. And that's why those things are happening. And I'll talk about this, significantly more later, but a big thing that we notice in the mental health population with ADLs is that obtaining barrier to getting, a lot of our mental health clients do not have the resources that are required for successful ADL participation. So in order to participate in ADLs successfully, you have to have access to a shower, you have to have access to, a clean toothbrush, things like that. And so overcoming those barriers are really big. And that's where we notice a pretty big barrier for our mental health people. And we'll talk about that a lot more, but we notice a lot of impacts for ADL performance with a wide variety of mental health diagnoses. Depression is one. Adults living with depression are a lot more likely than adults without depression, living with depression, to have an ADL disability. So we notice it a lot with schizophrenia as well. So thinking about positive and negative symptoms of schizophrenia, where positive are, the things that are there that should, so, hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, and then negative, that the things that are not there that should be. So that really flat affect, poor attention, that anhedonia, that reduced social interaction or emotional kind of regulation. So when we notice someone that has a lot of negative symptoms, that those are a lot more prevalent, we also notice a pretty significant decline in ADL tasks or hygiene tasks specifically. So we're noticing, an increase in body odor or yellowing teeth or a lot of layered clothing that's not, appropriate for the weather or the season that we're in. So those are some things that we see. Another big impact on, with ADLs and mental health is trauma. So trauma has a huge impact on every aspect of life, but a really big one on ADL performance and participation as well. So an example kind of this is a sexual assault survivor, someone that has dealt with that. We have some clients now that we have that have gone through things like this, and they don't want to shower because that body odor almost keeps others away. And that kind of gives them a little bit, a sense of control that they have back. So, but it does impact, that is kind of an impact of an ADL. So Tim's going to kind of talk about now more of the IADL side, and then we'll kind of get into more assessments and stuff like that.
All right, so like Sam mentioned, I'm going to talk about IADLs. And so IADLs are activities to support daily life within the home and community that often require more complex interactions than those found in ADLs. So the ability to perform these tasks improve quality of life and make it important for us as clinicians to really work on improving performance and teaching these functional skills. So you see the little, I guess, bullets that kind of highlight some of the major domains of IADLs. So with regards to medication and health management. So when thinking about these are activities like taking your medications, being able to read your medication bottles, fill a medication planner, call in refills. With money, financial management. So you're looking at being able to pay your bills, possibly open a checking account, creating budgets, food preparation and cooking. So meal prep, actually cooking, cleaning up the items, shopping, being able to create a shopping list, go to the grocery store, be able to transport that home, technology, thinking about how to use a computer, how to use a cell phone, downloading apps, all those things that entails, being able to do your own laundry, being able to kind of, in a sense, budget for laundry, what that looks like, transportation, riding the bus, finding other modes of transportation, safely riding your bike, walking, knowing different routes, home management, that's making sure you're being able to clean, organize, making sure your house is in order. So those are kind of those basic domains that you'll find in your IADLs. And thinking about IADLs and mental health, what our experience has shown is that there's a combination of things that are really important when thinking about IADL performance. So skill knowledge and how to do these skills and experience is important, as well as the environmental resources. All can lead to successful performance or possible deficits. Sam touched on it a little bit when she was talking about the ADLs and mental health, but specifically with the client base that we work with, there's not a lot of resources that are available to them now and were available to them when they were kids, when they were possibly able to learn these skills. So there's a number of clients that we've placed in apartments that have never lived on their own, and they're in their 40s or 50s, and this is the first time that they are getting a bill in the mail. They don't know, they've just not had the experience with that. And so it's important to kind of think about that as we're trying to do these interventions with our clients, that how they grew up, what's around them has possibly limited their performance. And we are starting at a different level than someone who grew up around a lot of stores, or grew up with families that really want that kind of highlighted, oh, you need to do your own laundry, or how to use a computer. I found that a lot, that people have never had a computer, don't know how to use a computer, what the internet is. And a lot of that is kind of resource-based. So when they were in school, that wasn't a thing, or where if they are younger, just some of the schools, and if they left school early, they didn't get a chance to learn those skills. So it's really important as clinicians to kind of be aware of that and be aware of their history and get to know them, and really kind of look at what are some of the reasons behind maybe some of the performance related issues, or why there are deficits related to some of these skills that we may feel like, oh, I would have thought someone would know how to do that. So it's important to kind of really think about that, so we don't necessarily shame the people that we're working with, that it's okay that someone doesn't know how to do something, and that we're not making them feel bad because I may have had the resource to have my own computer at home when I was a kid, or live down the street from a mall or from a certain grocery store. So it's really important to think about community and how that has affected the people that we work with and their ability to want to do and ability to perform some of these tasks. It's mentioned there that for some of our clients that they may have lived in shelters or lived in settings where they just have not had the opportunity to ride a bus or schedule their own appointments. And so you can kind of start from the bottom with a lot of their skills and really work on creating a knowledge base so that they are able to be independent. We also have here Places for People. We have a number of people that maybe from different countries that don't have the language to kind of navigate through a lot of our intervention, a lot of our institutions. Worked with someone from Africa who I had to teach what a laundromat was. We have clients from Bosnia who Sam has done a great job of going with to the grocery store to help him learn how to pay his bills. He had a lot of anxiety around not knowing how to do these things. We see that a lot, is that people can be very anxious in a grocery store or in a crowd, and how do we work with them on that anxiety so they're able to navigate these institutions, navigate these services so that they are able to complete these tasks independently. So a lot can go into the work that we do that on the surface we may not have thought of when we went in that day. Sam also mentioned trauma. I think there's a lot of trauma around certain, it could possibly be around community and where certain people live, and just the memories that come back when if someone says, oh, hey, I want to go to a grocery store, and we just happen to be by an Aldi's or be by a Family Dollar, and it's not close to where they live, but it's close to where they may have spent a lot of time around unhealthy people. And it could evoke trauma and trigger something with them. And we want to make sure that we're really being thoughtful about the services that we're providing to the people that we work with. All right, so here's another of our designated question stops.
Sorry, I was muted. So we don't have anything yet in the queue, but the individual from earlier, the chat is full, responded about those statistics. Let me find what they said. They were speaking about the psychosocial statistics. So maybe later we can chat, and we'll hopefully send out more resources along with the slides again after the talk.
And our emails are listed on the first slide. So if whomever that is wants to email Sam or I, we can address that then, I guess. If there's no questions, we'll just keep going.
Oh, we got one really quick.
Okay. At the buzzer.
Yeah, right in time. In general, dental health is just another stigma of mental illness. So that may be just more of a comment, but that's what I got for you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so we will go ahead and get started again. So this is kind of, I'm going to talk about now how to assess ADL and IADL performance, where they're at now, and then how to kind of measure progress and performance going forward. So specifically for the mental health population, you're not going to find a ton of standardized objective assessments for ADL and IADL participation. So you're going to find that a lot of these, a lot of assessments or a lot of kind of ways to build a baseline is going to rely on skilled observation from the clinician and self-report from the client. So that being said, there are, I mean, there's a million OT assessments that will look at ADL and IADL performance and participation, and some of those are applicable for mental health settings. So a couple of those that I'll go into a couple, but that anybody can use. The Milwaukee Evaluation of Daily Living Skills is an ADL based assessment that can be used for mental illness. Also, there's a test of grocery shopping skills that you can do. There's the UCSD performance-based skills assessment, and there's like a million cooking assessments out there that you can do too for, there's quite a few of those for mental illness population. So big ones that I kind of want to talk about and touch on, other ones that you might hear kind of frequently within the mental health world, I guess. The role checklist is one. It is a self-report, again, survey that is used to assess the client's roles and then satisfaction with those roles. So it includes, 10 common roles that a person can have, and it has them rate how important it is to them and then how satisfied they are in that role. So those roles are student, worker, volunteer, caregiver, home maintainer, friend, family member, religious participant, hobbyist, participant in organization. So it gains insight into that client's priorities. So you're kind of seeing it's kind of a building block of, I'm really valuing my role as a friend, but I'm not very satisfied in it because I don't feel like I'm putting effort into it. That's how you can kind of gauge where to start those interventions at. So that's one that we do use that is relatively quick too. So that's helpful. And then the other one, this one, the OTs of the group will have probably heard of because you can use it with a lot of different populations, but it's the CELS, the Coleman Evaluation of Living Skills. It was originally developed for the mental health population, and so that's why it's used here. That's why we use it at Places for People, but it's used, you can, it was originally used to evaluate ADLs and IADLs within that field. So it's used to determine what areas can be improved on. So it's an observation-based and interview-based assessment. So it evaluates living skills in 17 different skills in about 5 areas. So self-care, safety and health, money management, transportation, or community mobility, telephone, work, leisure, participation. So 17 items or 17 things that you have them do are scored through either observation-based performance tasks or interview questions that clinician rates them, that specific task as independent or needs assistance or just not applicable. So the person basically gets points on how they're rated, and that total score indicates the need for assistance. So there's one other one I kind of want to touch on. It's the DLA 20. It's the one that Places for People puts a lot of weight behind, that is used often. It's not an OT assessment. It can be used by anybody, but it does measure ADL and IADL participation and how their performance is. It enables that clinician to really look at everyday parts of life that are impacted by mental illness. So it helps with treatment planning and measures progress over time. It measures those daily life activities like health practices, communication, problem solving, housing, things like that. So it's another one that you can use, and that one you don't necessarily even need the person to do. It's kind of one that you can do on your own while reflecting with the client. So those are relatively quick. There's and going back even to the question around like kind of community mobility and community integration, if it's a setting too that you can kind of break apart assessments, I don't know how standardized it has to be, but using different subsections of the CELS or like the DLA 20 might even work for that, for screening tools. But I would recommend too, there's a lot of community integration and socialization assessments out there that those might work too. So there is a lot out there. If you just have to kind of find and And if you have the luxury of not being as standardized and being able to rely a little bit more on that skilled observation, it's helpful just for the mental health world, because you got to get a little creative when you want to do assessment. So kind of speaking to that, overall, you really want to make sure you're conducting that assessment in the environment that the person's going to actually be performing the skill, if possible, right? So and you're doing this, to identify reasons why they're not performing that ADL or IADL as successfully. So you really want to make sure you're looking at the environment that it's happening in, the resources that are available to them at that moment and that are available for successful skill performance. And then obviously like the skill level of the individual and them actually doing the skill. Basically, you need to observe them doing the skill at their current level in their natural environment. That's going to be your best skilled observation based assessment to really get a baseline of where they're at. So you need to see, the idea here though, is you need to watch them do the skill at their current level and potentially let them fail at it without jumping in. So you have a realistic assessment result that's objective as possible when you're not able to do those like big standardized objective measures. So a lot of the times when I begin to start working with someone and I know they have a lot of kind of ADL concerns or IADL concerns, thinking about the grocery store. So I will take them to the grocery store and watch them shop, and I, just let them listen to the grocery store, see what they do. So I'm looking at a lot of things. I'm observing them do this. And so I know where to build my interventions upon. So how are they shopping? Are they grabbing everything off the aisles? Are they running from this end of the store to this end of the store? They're not navigating, they're not sequencing. Are they looking for signs? Are they using a list? Are they looking at sales? Are they just grabbing all of the junk food? What's going on? And I'm not anything, I'm just watching it happen, right? So I'm getting my assessment, I'm getting my objective, this is how they're doing it. So that's kind of one way. And then I know kind of where to tailor my interventions. Like, okay, they kind of went through the store appropriately, but they were just grabbing the first thing that they saw. So then I know I need to work on kind of identifying items a little bit better and, go from there. So watching, another kind of way to do this is watching them fill their medication planner on their own. There's obviously a big caveat here. We cannot just watch them fill their medication planner incorrectly, but what I usually do here is I have people fill their medication planner and I'm watching. And then, if I'm noticing those mistakes or inaccuracies, and we'll redo it together with me doing it correctly, but really seeing, where is their baseline? Where are they starting? So giving them a new location to find and then have them show me how they get on the bus and get to that location when I'm trying to teach them community mobility skills. Let them, get on the bus with them, let them take you to the wrong area of town and figure out, how do we get back from here? How do we do this? How do we build that assessment up? So those are some kind of ways to do. So another way that we can kind of begin to assess ADL and IADL performance is using IMR. And so IMR is an illness management and recovery is what it's called. I know a lot of people on here might be super familiar with it. So I'll just very briefly, it's a skills-based teaching tool that's used to help people with mental health diagnoses learn how to better manage their symptoms and improve overall well-being and function. It can be done in groups or individually, and basically just utilizes these modules or handouts essentially. And it walks the clients through different areas of their life in recovery. They have a lot of exercises in them and questions, and it can help that person really understand the main points that module or handout is trying to kind of cover. In EIMR, which the mental health world loves all of their acronyms, but EIMR is just enhanced illness management and recovery. They added a module called healthy lifestyles. It's module 9 for people that are really into it. They kind of know what I'm talking about, but they have a lot of personal hygiene trackers and they have hygiene diaries, and I'll talk about them in a little bit, but these are really good. I use them sometimes even as an assessment tool where I'll start, if the client's open to it, is open to talking about that stuff early on, notes where the client is and how they're participating in grooming and hygiene tasks if I'm noticing a decline there. So a lot of different ways to get a baseline of where everybody's at. So.
All right, so I'm gonna start.
Can I pause you guys really quick?
Yeah.
There were just a lot of questions about assessments.
Oh, okay.
So KELS, what does that stand for?
The Coleman Evaluation of Living Skills.
And then will there be a list of these assessments that you guys were talking about in the resources, or?
We can.
Okay.
I can make a list.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
Definitely do that.
I think that was kind of like multiple. I think there were multiple questions just about that.
Okay. Yeah, I can make a list of kind of the ones that I talked about, and then the ones that are kind of the big that
Okay.
ones.
Sounds good. Thanks much. Sorry, that was it.
No, thank you.
And we're back. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about interventions. And so with ADL and IADL interventions, these interventions can focus on skill building or utilizing compensatory strategies, or they can also kind of combine and do both when we're thinking about the interventions. So we want to focus on teaching the specific missing skill and then support and find ways for optimal performance. This may include adapting the environment or strategies for performance. So thinking of one of the great things that I enjoy here at Places for People is that we do get to work with people in their natural environment. So we do get to do a lot of in-home visits. And so we're able to, if we're doing an assessment and assess that someone has deficits or needs around organization, or they identify, I really struggle with keeping my apartment clean, we're able to actually work on that within their home. And so if we also identify that there may be a fall risk or concerns around home safety, we're able to actually do that one-on-one with the client in there. And so we're able to work within that natural environment and then work on changing that environment. So if someone has really poor lighting, let's make sure they have working light bulbs. Let's make sure that there are no loose rugs, cords around their house, so that they're able to be safe while teaching them the importance of making sure that these things are correctly, I guess, stored or whatever in their apartments. So rather than trying to do that in a clinic or something, we're able to actually do that in person. Doing grocery shopping tasks, we're able to do that in a grocery store rather than necessarily working within a clinic and trying to see if then that skill could be transferred once they left the clinic. We're able to actually see and be able to measure performance and create strategies that do enhance and work on kind of making that optimal performance possible.
So going into interventions for activities of daily living. So kind of to review those ADL domains or categories, showering and bathing, grooming, dressing, toileting, toilet hygiene, sexual activity, and then personal device care are the ones that kind of are encompassing here. So going into this, as I talked about earlier, a big thing that we notice in the mental health population is that obtaining barrier to individuals really participating in these activities successfully or as optimally as they can. So a lot of our mental health clients don't have the resources that are required for really successful ADL performance. So a really, really big intervention that you'll hear me probably repeat 15 times when I talk about this is just helping them find access to these kinds of items. So an individual that is experiencing homelessness does not have a shower or, toiletry items readily available for bathing and grooming ADLs. So, finding them community showers, or we're really lucky here at Places for People, we have a shower on site that we can bring people in to use. Finding them community resources to get toiletries or clothing is huge. And it's something that we do value as an intervention. and is billable as an intervention, and, you know, is something that you have to get a little creative sometimes, but does, is usually, you know, some of the biggest barriers to cross. So, other kind of interventions to focus on skill building, you know, identifying reasons why they're not performing that ADL. So using that EIMR, IMR, healthy lifestyle things, using those, you know, personal hygiene diaries, which are hygiene planning sheets where basically they go in and they rate, you know, how often they're participating in showering tests Monday through Friday. Like, do you shower every day? Do you shower once a week? Do you skip it most weeks? You know, and it goes through different ADLs that way, and they rate how often they do it. And then you can kind of track, and you have a person keep the diaries, you know, like on their own. And that's also an intervention that we can use. We come into a lot of kind of, I don't know, extra things to think about here. There's a lot of, you know, education around the benefits of good hygiene, things like that. All of these are interventions that are really helpful. When we come into people with pretty severe mental illness or that are pretty sick or that are kind of noticing pretty severe symptoms, it gets a little bit trickier, right? So we used to have someone, he's actually doing significantly better now. His whole life has changed, but we have somebody for the longest time was experiencing homelessness, and, you know, body odor was severe, right? So he wasn't showering, was not interested in doing that. It was very important to him and his delusion that he needed to have that body odor for the Army to be able to locate him. So he had to smell, he had to have that smell. So imagine trying to do an ADL intervention with that. And so there was a lot of, you know, education on why hygiene is important, why showering is important, why, you know, how that stops infections, how that makes everything else, you know, how that relates to your physical health, things like that. We would eventually got to a point where he was interested in coming to places for people for the shower, but it did take a long time. Also dressing for the same individual. You know, we were noticing he was wearing a lot of extra layers of clothing. So our biggest intervention is when we did go and see him, you know, let's remove one layer, let's remove one shirt. And, you know, that was our great intervention for that day, was trying to get just a little bit. Cause, you know, we're a lot of the time too with dressing, you know, we notice some temperature regulations concerns with certain medications. And so that's a big one that is a barrier for sure. So we also want to kind of think about sensory interventions that we can do if there's anything that limits that. Same with adaptive equipment. So we had a client that had this kind of fear and past trauma with showers. He also had a lot of sensory things going on to where he didn't like the feel of water on him. And so his also, you know, shower wasn't big enough. He was kind of a larger guy. So it was a lot. So, you know, really adapting that space. So he needed a shower chair for sure, because he wasn't physically really able to kind of stand up and maintain that. But, you know, also education around bed baths and doing anything kind of, because he wanted to, you know, he wanted to shower, but he had that sensory issue. So there were things like that as well that can kind of come up. So, you know, locating those community resources on where people can get you know, toothbrushes, shampoo, soap. If everybody was in St. Louis, I could send the ones out that we use, but I don't know how helpful that would be. But if anybody needs anything for St. Louis and stuff, let me know. You can always email me and I can send out the stuff that I give to people. But like locating community resources, like coat drives, there's a ton of clothing ones that I didn't know about until I kind of started really looking into it. A big kind of a thing is look at your local hospital. If you're not in St. Louis, they usually send out, usually have a lot of these like PDFs even that they give to people on just kind of community resources if you're not like always in that realm. So those are some ADL interventions. Tim's going to kind of go into some more like IADL interventions.
So I believe that you all were sent some handouts that Sam and I both used regarding some of Sam mentioned a little bit about the hygiene diary. So we wanted to make sure that you guys were walking away with some sheets and resources that we use when we're thinking about utilizing some of these interventions around ADL and IADL. So kind of touching on some of those domains of IADL and thinking about some specific intervention examples around home management, thinking about coming up with a cleaning list. And again, not trying to overwhelm people with trying to do too much when we're thinking about cleaning, and also thinking about just the physical exertion that goes along with a home management task. So trying to structure, let's work on cleaning your kitchen today and kind of move on to a different room the next day, and trying to maybe build endurance, or if they're unable to really stand for long periods of time, how can we adapt that intervention so they're able to maybe sit and clean a table, and then kind of keeping track of those things. With money management, we do a lot of bill paying activities here. And so at the beginning of every month, let's create a list of what bills we have to pay, how much they are each month. Possibly setting up budget billing is a great way to help with kind of that budgeting. We do with our clients, medication obviously is a huge part of that. And what is the best strategy for each person to make sure that they're taking their medications every day, and really designing those interventions around what works best for the client. So we have people that really, I want to know exactly what my medication is, what it looks like, what it's for. So let's create some picture charts. And then the pharmaceutical company decides to change what a medication looks like. So I got to redo that one. So it's just something that's continually ongoing. And the more comfortable someone feels with managing their medications, maybe they're able to start managing that more independently, keeping their medications at home, taking straight from the bottle rather than putting it in a planner. So we're always kind of looking for ways to create interventions that really sort of foster that independence. With the technology and communication IADL example, within this pandemic, Zoom, obviously we're on Zoom, and Zoom has become so prevalent in the way that we function as a society. And so we had a number of our clients that could not meet with their primary care physicians or a psychiatrist in person. So what did that look like? We had to set up video calls. We had to set up Zoom for some of our clients. And we as clinicians also were unable to go into people's apartments to do this. So how could we try to do this over the phone? And it required a lot of patience, a lot of, this isn't working, I don't want to do this anymore. And we kept having to try. And eventually people that were so against using Zoom or not feeling comfortable with it were able to do virtual visits with their doctors. And it was so important for that because these doctors would not fill their prescriptions if they didn't meet with the clients. And so we had to utilize that as a real intervention for people. I mentioned earlier about someone had the question about transportation and if people are used to going to the grocery store. We had a number of people where we had to set up medical transport for those doctor's appointments. For people that were in more of a crisis setting and needed to go to feeling like they needed to go to the hospital, where in the past we would go out and maybe pick them up and drive them to the hospital. And that was something that we were just unable to do or uncomfortable doing. We utilize EMS a lot more for that medical transportation. And so it just brought about different resources and different avenues than what we had done in the past, and really working on trying to make sure that they felt comfortable and walking through the steps of what medical transport looks like. And when they pick you up, when they come back to get you from the appointment, and having to navigate anxiety around, are they going to come back and to get me. I don't know, I'm stuck here. They're not coming, and trying to really work on connecting them to that resource. So it was just another way that we kind of, in a sense, there was kind of forced independence a lot within the past couple of years when trying to do and utilize these skill building interventions. And we were really able to see that and able to see the outcomes and see the performance from those. Another question break.
So there was a question that Don actually went ahead and answered. So on average, how many ACT clients do you work with per day? And Don Ship went ahead and said they have 96 persons on their caseload. I'm guessing that's your team, which is shared by 10 different clinicians because they are in leadership positions. You guys, I'm guessing they personally will work directly with 1 to 4 persons each day. I don't know if you have anything to add.
So yeah, generally with assertive community treatment, the evidence shows that if we can work with the clients 2 to 3 times a week for on average 2 to 3 hours, that generates the best outcomes for their treatment. So ACT is very, like I meant, is very client-centered, and each client has their own treatment plan and goals and objectives. And based around those goals and objectives, it really dictates how that client's schedule looks. And so if someone has a goal of wanting to learn how to ride the bus while also wanting to get a job, then Sam as an OT and our vocational specialist will work with them weekly. So they would be seen twice that week to try to work on identified areas of need. So it's really client-centered. Each clinician typically on average sees about 5 clients a day. So you're looking at 25 visits per week for the clinician. So that's kind of what their, I guess, expected kind of productivity or what their schedule would look like from a clinical standpoint.
That's good. And someone asked, what is sequencing? I'm not in occupational therapy. I'm assuming this means going in order. Are there resources for this?
Okay.
I think it was you.
I know, I think I say sequencing like all the time. Yes, so that's exactly what it is. It's basically going in order. So it's going in order of how the task or the whatever it is typically should be done. So, if you're like brushing your teeth is a hard one because some people, I guess, do different steps, but you're gonna put the toothpaste on before you put the toothbrush in your mouth, making sure things are going in order for the task is just all what that means.
So there's like learning theory kind of around that. And if someone wants to look more about like forward chaining or backward chaining around like just, it's basically just a way to kind of go step by step. And if you learn in that order, that you're able to kind of replicate things in that specific order.
Then someone said, how do you engage or brainstorm with clients that use their physical or mental health disabilities, stating they can't shower or clean themselves? What are some tips to try and get them to think outside the box to solve these problems?
On the physical side of this, there's quite a bit of this is where like the occupational therapy adaptive equipment comes into huge thing. So if they're saying their physical disability, they can't reach behind to either like wipe themselves after toileting, or they can't, reach their feet to wash in the shower. Getting different adaptive equipment in there that you can get on Amazon. Like you don't have to have like necessarily anybody can buy it. To have an OT come in and do an assessment would probably be preferred. But whatever you have. So there's different kind of tools that you can use. So sometimes it's as simple as putting a chair in the shower and then they can sit and then they can really, wash themselves more effectively. So making sure you're looking at the physical environment and seeing those kinds of things. There's different like reachers and there's a thing that holds toilet paper even and they can wrap around. I forgot what that's called, but so there's a lot of different adaptive equipment that they can do for a physical health thing. Mentally, there's not going to be a physical tool, right? Like a reacher is not going to help somebody in the mental health side, but I think the biggest thing that I try to do is try to figure out their past history with it. So something like, have you always had kind of this, and you say this better, right? But have you always kind of had this adversity to showering? Is there something that is preventing them from doing it now? Really identifying if it's more of like a sensory issue, they just don't like how it feels, they don't like, or if it's more of a trauma thing, then you need to kind of step back and address that underlying cause, right? So if they have a lot of trauma going on and that's why they're not showering, really addressing that trauma is going to be number one, because it's obviously going to be impacting a lot more of areas in their life besides just showering. But so that's really looking at underlying causes is one, and figuring out figuring out why they're not participating in it is really going to give you a lot of answers, I think, or that has, at least in my experience, it at least has kind of tailors you in the direction of what interventions or what big concern needs to be identified first. I hope that helps. Because usually, in the mental health side, it's not that someone doesn't usually, right? And so I don't want to say this all the time because we get people that are, very sick and have these delusions around not wanting to shower for different reasons. But for the most part, a lot of these guys, they just, there's something going on that's preventing them from doing those tasks. And so figuring that out is usually really key. So I hope that helps.
And with, so Sam was talking about the adaptive equipment and brought up Amazon and finding things through Amazon. Medicaid does not cover a ton of adaptive equipment. Can be hard to have insurance cover those things. In St. Louis, we have an organization called St. Louis Help that we're able to reach out to them with adaptive equipment needs and it's a nonprofit that has people donate adaptive equipment there. And we're sometimes able to get shower chairs or walkers, canes, things. I've been able to find like dry shampoo and wipes for people that, again, may struggle with getting in and out of a shower so that they're able to clean themselves. So for people not in the St. Louis area, looking to see if there are those type of equipment lending programs where you're at, because we use that all the time and it's a great resource for that. On the mental health side, kind of echoing what Sam brought up, but she does a great job building rapport with the clients that she works with. And it can be an uncomfortable topic around talking about hygiene because that's a very personal act. And the more we're able to build rapport with our clients where they feel comfortable talking to us, we can possibly address those topics and be able to bring that up or initiate a conversation around that in a way that's thoughtful and respectful and empathetic to that client. Anything else, Kara?
No, that's all I had for questions.
Okay. All right, so for our, I guess, final component to our presentation, we wanted to include a case study. So hopefully you guys got this with the materials. And so we want you to read over this case study around Gina and look at what's in the case study. There's some of the assessment tools that Sam mentioned, the KELS and the role checklist, and read through there looking to see what are some of the identified needs or deficit areas that are mentioned for Gina. And then we want you to maybe spend 5 minutes or so kind of thinking about what a skill building intervention would look like for Gina based around those identified needs. So thinking about some of those domains, the IADL domains, and thinking, okay, this is something that she identified that she needs assistance with, or we see that there's difficulties within her home. Let's think about what kind of skills we can use to kind of help her function better. And so once you're done with that, if we can get some volunteers or maybe someone that could either in the chat or the Q&A just come up with some ideas. And I think we can maybe look at some of those and provide feedback, or maybe some of the other participants could jump in and kind of say, oh yeah, that's something that I also thought of. So we'll give you, like I said, like 5 minutes to kind of look over, and we'll kind of reconvene after that and finish up the presentation. Ready, go.
Like someone was having trouble seeing the case study.
I'll look into it really. Give me a second.
Does anyone have anything that they want to share in the chat about the intervention that they came up with? And I'm sorry if it wasn't clear about where the case study was, or if I didn't explain that well enough.
So yeah, like pull it up, you can see and take it. So yeah, budgeting is gonna be big for Gina for sure. That's definitely like an area that she saw, or that was pretty big, noticeable, I guess. The IADL.
And then you mentioned the opening mail. So yeah, budgeting, like Sam mentioned, and really thinking about, because it looks like she needs work on budgeting for food and monthly income. So making sure that kind of thinking about what prioritizing things and making sure that the things that they do need to spend their money on are addressed, and kind of looking at what a need versus a want is, and trying to kind of come up with thinking about kind of the budgeting money for food, where you're going shopping is important as well. Looking at some of the cooking stuff, there's her mentions her counter, the dishes were in the sink. Part of cooking is kind of the cleanup as well. She did identify taking care of her pet and everything. So yeah, there's some good examples in here about some resources and things that you can do. We have a client that Sam works with right now that really that has an emotional support dog, and kind of really values that role, and kind of how important it is to kind of take care of a pet and have that as a support. So it's great.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that you noticed the outdated medication being there. That's something that we see quite often. So as a big kind of like red flag for that medication management component being there for sure. So yeah, those are some big, getting rid of them and things like that. Like that's and then looking to see why are those still there is big.
And also being able to find programs that may take outdated medicines, some pharmacies and stuff like that also is important when you're looking to get rid of that medication, to dispose of it. Yeah, Gina would be able to do a medication management task weekly with clients. And sometimes we do, there's some clients we see daily for medication management based around their need, their identified need and deficit area. So
That's good to know about the police departments taking old medications. Thanks for that comment. I wonder if they do in Missouri. We'll have to check because that's a good resource.
we have a pharmacy on site here at Places for People that has a disposal thing. So
oh, thank you.
Well, thank you guys for sharing those ideas and participating in that chat. And again, sorry if you're having difficulty accessing the case study. And Sam's very proud of this last slide because of all the images and little fun graphics on it. So do we have any kind of final questions?
I don't see any questions. I think I still see comments from the case study. But maybe if we give everybody just a couple more seconds, if there are any questions.
So with, I see a question on here about reimbursement for OT services. So here at Places for People, we bill at the same rate at a daily rate. So I could work with someone for 10 minutes or work with them for 2 hours and it still bills at the same rate. So there's within the ACT services, we don't separate based around discipline. So we have nursing on our team as well, and they bill at the same that we do. Sorry, I stole your job, Kara. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I hadn't scrolled down all the way. I appreciate it. Need to get rid of all these. We have a lot of thank yous, good jobs.
Okay. So thank you guys for participating and coming to our training. I just want to, what we're doing and what I think all of you guys as clinicians, can be a very rewarding but difficult, I guess, work that we do. And so I think just as I'm leaving this and kind of reflecting back on this, I want to make sure that we talked a lot about interventions and these goals that people are working on and performance and kind of optimal performance, and just making sure that we're aware that it takes time, that a lot of these skills aren't built in one session, that we're trying to teach someone how to ride the bus. It could take a long time if we're looking to teach them how to do laundry, teach them how to cook. It's not something that's going to be reflected in an 100% performance the next time you see them. So I think it's important to, as clinicians, to not get frustrated with ourselves if something doesn't work, that we are able to be creative and try something different, and make sure that that's expressed for our client as well, that it's okay for them to make mistakes, or it's okay for them to not get everything right the first time. And so you're kind of on a journey on terms of building the skills, and really it makes things more worthwhile when we both are involved, the client and the clinician, on trying to reach these goals. So I want to make sure that as I'm thinking about this, that's kind of highlighted and everything. Any final thoughts?
I don't think so. Thank you guys for joining and kind of contributing to the conversation. So if you guys need anything else or have any other questions, like Tim said earlier, our emails are on there. So feel free to always reach out, and I'll send a list of, I wrote out those assessments that I talked about. So I'll send those to Kizzy probably, and we'll go from there.
And I was about to ask you that because someone asked about if you all would be willing to answer questions as they present, if they can email you all, but you said it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think just throughout your webinar, people had questions about certain statistics, assessments, and community resources. So hopefully we'll follow up on all those.
Okay,
But I think that's all the questions that we have.
awesome. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna
Thank
go.
you.
Sam,
Okay.
if you can unshare your screen, I'm gonna share my screen really fast.
Okay.
I have a couple of trainings that are coming up. We have a wellness training. Sorry, I can't find a little thing up here. We have a wellness training that is a 4-day training starting next Monday to Thursday. It's going to be held here at Places for People. We also have a training coming up in February. It's engaging, challenging to serve persons. That's going to be via Zoom on February 22nd. And the last training we have coming up that we're opening to the public, but it's also only 35. Is it 35, Kara?
I think it's 30.
30, only 30 slots available for that. It's also our it's going to be Illume's first time hosting it. Thereafter, it's going to be a recurring training, so we will have it multiple times per year. The first training is going to be March the 31st, and it's going to be a half-day training. So look out for those. If you signed up for further email, there will be several email blasts for the upcoming trainings. And last but not least, we want to thank you all for attending. If you have a chance to click out, there may be a thing that pops up to tell you to fill out the survey. If not, please email me and I can send you a link for the survey.
And someone asked if the upcoming events are free. The wellness coaching event is a paid event, and the engaging, challenging a person served event is free. And then the ethics will be a small fee for individuals. Just to let you know about that.
Also, someone asked in the chat, when will you receive your certificate? So it's a up to 14 business day process. It's several steps that we have to go through. We have to verify attendance, time, and then we work on issuing out those certificates for either CEUs or just a certificate of attendance. So those will be sent out via email.
And I'm going to put our events link in the chat. Feel free to keep up to date on those, but Kizzy tends to be pretty good about sending out updated emails about progress on those trainings. If there aren't any more questions, I think that's all we have.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks.